Everybody, thank you so much for your hospitality and having us here. I'm delighted. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Oh, okay. Makes sense. Right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here and your hospitality. I'm delighted to be here and meeting you all. I've been asked to talk to you about a national quality control system that we have in the UK, and the transplant immunology lab participates in that. It's got a big presence. This is called NEQAS, and it stands for National External Quality Assessment Service. It's a national system that participation includes all UK labs, but also a lot of international labs. The NEQAS, the External Quality Assessment Service, is also known as External Proficiency Testing. And this is how, as a transplant immunology lab, this is how we know it from our European Federation of Immunogenetics accreditation. We are mandated by our accreditors to participate in this scheme and perform well. Any unsatisfactory performance is not allowed, and there is penalizing for the lab. All effective QMS systems include IQA, which is the internal quality assessment, and EQA, the external quality assessment, which is the NEQAS. And these schemes are part of monitoring laboratory performance and quality. The IQA assesses in real time whether the lab performance it's similar to their previous performance and whether the results are reproducible. The EQA, on the other hand, looks at differences between labs. We are all sent the same sample for testing. These are blind samples, and we all test them. We are all after the same result, hopefully. So there will be some comparison between the different labs, and is looking for differences or continuity over geography. The uses are that it uses the identical specimens, that they are treated by all laboratories exactly like the routine or clinical samples are treated. It's done periodically and is done retrospectively.
Can I just ask one question to you so that you can explain to our colleagues? They are actually clinicians, and they may not understand why the need for quality control, why the need for every reports are most similar. You know, you have got beads being supplied from the commercial companies. The report should be same throughout the country. It is not. Like sodium, potassium, calcium report. If you take sodium calcium report from the lab, the variation are there between lab to lab or same lab between few days, but the variation is very minimal. You are supposed to be, let's say, within 99% of that range. It should give similar report. But in immunology laboratory, it is not like that. Why it is and how you overcome that, if you can explain that, the need for national quality control.
So we are looking, first of all, we are looking to be standardized. The transplanting is to report to ODT so that these organs are allocated nationally. We need to be able to prove that we are good enough to perform, to produce an accurate donor typing, and all labs that participate need to do that. In addition to that, There are schemes that they're a little bit more of a gray area. So, for example, the antibody testing schemes. We all try to produce the same results, but it's not always the same. Cutoffs and MFIs, strengths basically, can differ slightly from lab to lab. So for these schemes, we are looking for a consensus amongst, for example, 75% of the labs. And any lab that does not meet the consensus then will be deemed as unacceptable. If a lab is continuously unacceptable, for example, on 2 occasions, then there will be a poor performer. And then obviously there will be some trouble coming with explanation of what's going on. But there are services in the transplant immunology lab that they are commissioned. We have started getting paid for the disease donor typing. There are certain standards we need to adhere to. On top of providing the quality we are expected to provide. But I think in transplant immunology, because we are sort of divided into HLA typing, which is very black and white, if, for example, a certain allele will be or will not be there, and then, of course, we've got the antibody schemes on the other side, it is quite difficult to reach a consensus, and that's where the variation comes from. Eventually, it all aims to patient care. Our patients are listed in the ODT for a transplant. We list antibodies. These patients may transfer from one center to another. We all need to be standardized. I don't know if that answers your question.
And also, if you can explain why it is necessary, like a donor whose HLA we know, say 10, 12 years ago, has come for retransplant. Why do you need to do it again?
So historically, in the transplant, the methodologies in the transplant immunology lab, the methodologies that define the different HLA alleles have evolved. Years and years and years ago, we were using serology, which is the most basic methodology. But in recent years, we have developed molecular DNA typing methodologies. A patient who got transplanted in the 90s, for example, would have only been typed by serology. When this patient comes for a transplant in the recent years, then we will have to repeat the typing by molecular methodology, because the resolution that we would have by serology is not longer adequate. So in those cases, you may hear the antibody, the transplant lab asking for another sample, because we will need to perform more high resolution methods to complete, let's say, to update the typing. The typing will still be the same, but there will be higher resolution. Okay, so why do we need NEQAS? We need NEQAS. One of the main advantages is for method validation. When NEQAS send us blind samples for testing, different labs may use different methodologies. So we all reach at the same result, but we may use different methodologies. One lab might use Luminex, another lab might use PCR-SSP. All this data is collected by NEQAS. We will all report. Sorry. We will all report the methodology we have used. And by analyzing this data, we can use it to provide us quite a lot of reassurance while we are validating a methodology. If our lab has used the Luminex, but we are looking to implement PCR SSP, we can contact NEQAS and they will give us quite a lot of data on how this method has performed over the years. Another advantage is identifying problems and deficiencies in the methods. If a certain lab has reported something completely different, but the issue stems from the methodology, this is also very useful for us to know. We are mandated by our accreditation bodies, that's both NEQAS, ISO 15189, but also FE standards. We are mandated to participate in NEQAS for all of our tests, and we are mandated to perform well. Any performance that is not quite right, we have to answer to these bodies and we have to justify. So it's quite important we do well. For example, in the UK, the disease donor typing was commissioned in April 22, but it's not possible for a lab to be commissioned to maintain this service unless they are NEQAS accredited. And the NEQAS won't provide accreditation unless the performance in NEQAS it's acceptable. Obviously, we've got our credibility and reputation to think about how well we do. It gives us quite a lot of control of laboratory procedures and variables. So what does that mean? For example, I mentioned that all samples need to be tested in exactly the same way as our clinical samples. If NEQAS samples arrive in the lab and they cannot be tested because, for example, lack of staff, that allow us to let the manager know to provide us the appropriate resources. For example, equipment. If the equipment is broken and we can't perform the testing, then really we need to be looking at the management of equipment, the servicing, the maintenance, how we manage these variables in the lab. It highlights best practice. We can share quite a lot of information between the different labs, but also it's a great tool for assessing staff competency. Staff need to have their competencies assessed and proven once a year. And in our lab and every other lab in the UK, after staff perform NEQAS and there's obviously satisfactory performance, we use that for competency assessment. Overall, we need NEQAS. We need to maintain our quality, but also improve it so that we can improve patient care and we can reassure our users that what results we give them are clinically relevant and accurate. The schemes we participate in are several. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but basically we cover our cross-matching methodologies, which is the flow cytometric, the CDC, the cytotoxic cross-match, but also our antibody schemes. They are very important. They are quite difficult schemes. Scheme 3 is the detection. We've also got the scheme 6 and also the tissue typing schemes. We've got a low, medium resolution, but also a very high resolution. In addition to that, we have the educational schemes. These are schemes that they are not scored, but they can have some interesting elements, and it gives us the opportunity to find out what everybody else is doing, to test. Actually, sometimes we use them to test our methods to see if the methods we use in the lab are strong enough to detect any rare alleles or any unusual patterns or profiles that have been detected in patients. So the overall NEQAS process is, first of all, the lab processes. We receive their samples and then we book them in. We test blind, and we manage exactly the same way as our clinical samples. This means when the samples come in, and normally they would be booked in and DNA would be extracted by the support staff before our biomedical and clinical scientists perform the assay. The same thing would happen with the NEQA samples. It might be tempting to think, well, we'll get the senior members of staff to perform the testing from the beginning to the end, but that's really counterproductive. We allow all the staff involved in routine samples to also do the testing for NEQAS. If we are confident that the less senior staff are competent to perform processes for patients, then we should be confident to allow them to test NEQA samples as well. We analyze the samples, we authorize them. These results are shown to the consultant. I get to see all of them. We enter and check in the NEQAS website, and then we submit. We are not allowed to communicate with any lab with regard to the results. There has been practice in the past where labs would talk to each other because they would also, but I think NEQAS found out and they have actually made it a rule. So we are not allowed to discuss anything. These results are then assessed by NEQAS. They determine the consensus and they compare, and the notifiers of the results for each distribution, but also they provide us a cumulative report in every year to show how we are doing through the year. If the results are okay, that's the end of it. But in case of unacceptable results, the lab need to do a corrective preventative action. It's what we call a non-conformance according to our quality assurance, so that we can investigate the root cause analysis. We can set corrective, preventive, and remedial actions, and we have to respond within 20 days to NEQAS. If that's okay, if they're happy with that, then the performance is still satisfactory, then this is the end. But if we do become a poor performer, then they do notify other regulatory bodies in the UK.
Could I just, for the benefit of our clinical colleagues, could I just ask you, NEQAS is for external quality control, and there are penalties for reporting a report in case antibody is not there and you say, oh yeah, they're weakly positive, or if it is there, but you say, no, it is negative. Do you have internal quality control also, like in any other lab, clinical chemistry lab? Do you have internal quality control in your lab as well?
Yeah, so it needs assay. We run internal controls. This means these are samples of known ID, of expected, of known expected results that they are run with each assay. In addition to that, for the molecular typing, each test has got its own internal control band, for example, and these are constantly monitored. If the quality control in each assay fails, this gets reviewed and a non-conformance is raised. All these IQCs are reviewed by myself, but a non-conformance will be raised and it will be registered with the quality department, and also is discussed in the quality and governance meetings in our organization, which they are monthly. So it's all obviously open. Staff are informed about all these MCs, and not only that, but they are given quite a lot of ownership to resolve those events. And we will discuss the root cause. We will obviously go with what they tell us because they have performed, but we are responsible for amending the processes and make them if we feel the need to. Of course, yes, I will. Assessment. So the results must be correct in the case of all typing schemes, and that's because with the typing schemes, it's either correct or not. The allele is either there or not, or they can be according to consensus, which is 75%, for the assays that there are more gray areas, such as the antibodies. We will never agree 100% all the labs for all the antibodies. We will agree to some extent, but there might be some specificities depending on each laboratory cutoff of the assay that we will agree to disagree. The nomenclature must be absolutely correct. Results must be submitted within deadline, and typos or clerical errors are not allowed. Any clerical errors or typos will get penalized. And that's my final slide. There are some resources if anybody would like to read more about that. It's on the NEQAS website. There is a NEQAS manual, and our laboratory has got many standard procedures and policies for managing NEQAS effectively. So that's it. Thank you.